Good evening to all, and welcome to the Chatter Afters official companion podcast to HBO's The Last of Us, where we chat and seek the art beyond the clickers. How's everybody doing out there? I'm Brandon, accompanied by the Beyond the Clickers crew, Mike,
We have some idea what loss is. Finally.
and special guest from Film Optics, Christian.
What's up,
Let's
guys?
I should have been ready. I should have
let's
been ready.
go.
With
Let's go.
with
What's
the
going
soundboard.
on? Thank you so much for having me on.
You
It's
just so you
been a
know, you've
blast.
set the expectation for the episode, so you better be ready to just be bringing in them
I have
sounds
a
throughout.
few up my sleeve. I barely use these on our own show, but thank you so much for having me. Again, it's more fun to use for other people's shows. I don't know.
It's funny because it always is going to catch someone off guard because they're not going to
Yes.
expect you
Yes.
doing it.
And the thing is,
It's
we've
very
had Christian in on the channel before, so I don't know why I'm surprised. Why did it? I don't. It's
I don't think I used it last time when we talked about
you did it
Vox
for
Machina.
Vox. It happened.
Yeah. Oh, I guess I did. Dude, it's been a long week. It's only Tuesday. But
It's only
you know how it
Tuesday.
is. But thank you guys so much for having me on. Like, I'm
Awesome.
excited to talk about The Last of Us, episode 8.
So
An ultimate.
So we're
And,
almost there at the finish line of season 1, aka part 1 of The Last of Us. We have a lot to talk about. No news this cycle. Nothing really interesting came about. I mean, a lot of people talked to the great Troy Baker mainly because he had a role in this particular episode, which, by the way, he slayed his role as James. It was awesome. It was
Yeah.
great. But I think the best way to handle this episode is just to jump into episode 8 when we are in need. So we're not going to wait. No obstacles, no nothing, no interventions, no nothing. We're going to go straight into episode 8, and we're going to follow up with the sections that we do. The first section is going to be we're going to break down the episode and highlight the things that made it an amazing episode of HBO's The Last of Us. And at the very end, we'll talk about that Easter egg list, the things that survived the adaptation and was just quintessential. The game made life. And but of course, as we go through the episode, sometimes we don't do first impressions; we just jump in. But we get a special guest today. So Christian, I think this would be a perfect moment for you to let us know not only your thoughts on episode 8, but what are your thoughts on the season so far?
So my thoughts on the season so far, as Mike probably already knows, I think it is darn near perfect for a video game adaptation, a faithful traditional video game adaptation. You know, there are things that happen in the show that we get a little bit more insight on. And Troy Baker has said on the Last of Us podcast that, you know, it's an evolution, not necessarily an adaptation. I do agree with that, but I more view it as a companion piece to the game, because us who have played the game were able to, you know, relive the same story in a different light. It's almost as if you're, you know, reading a book and then watching the movie, or watching the movie and then reading the book. Like, I was into Game of Thrones way before I even started reading the books, and then I went back and read the books, and it's like I have two different versions of the same story. And, you know, it brings so much more light to it. It's weird because we're getting more information and context in the show than we are the video game, but that's just because they're two different mediums. And, you know, when you're playing a game, you want to spend most of your time actually playing the game, not just sitting through cutscenes. But overall, the experience has been very good. And episode 8 is, it just every time it gets me, because the winter section is like my favorite part in the game.
Nice.
And, you know, we finally get to kind of see that laid out on screen, and between that and the Left Behind DLC, and it's chilling. This episode was very chilling, and I'm excited to talk more about it.
Nice. Mike, I gave you
Yes.
very specific thoughts when I watched it the first time. I had to watch it twice.
Mhm.
But I know you probably watched it 2-3 times now. You
Twice.
know. What are your thoughts on episode 8 if we were to get a brief idea?
Yeah, this episode, as someone who hasn't replayed this section of the game, right? Like getting into it, it all felt very familiar. Like it's hitting those same like broad stroke story beats. But doing research and going back and realizing that they do change some things significantly, especially with like the character of David and how they present him this go around. It just made me love this episode even more and made me love the game more, strangely enough, because I was on the Geek Vibes podcast yesterday. We were talking about The Last of Us, and there are things about David that not a lot of people picked up on when playing the game that I always felt. So seeing them kind of expand on those ideas in this format, like Christian was saying, playing a game and watching the show are two vastly different experiences. And it just makes me love both mediums even more, because The Last of Us video game always got a lot of flack, right? Because it's basically a movie. It's not a real video game. And it's like, yeah, well,
Nah.
this clearly is showing us what the movie version of that story would be, and it's not the same.
Right.
And so I really, really love this episode. Bella Ramsey, fantastic as always. In my season review a couple months back now, I was raving about Bella and Pedro, and I'm glad that we're in like these last 2 episodes really highlights why she's so special. Pedro was good for the first half of the season, but the back half is really being carried by Bella.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is the main character after all. But yeah.
Yeah. We
Well,
learned
yeah.
that after the fact.
Well, yeah, that's true.
We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Yeah, I can't get too ahead of myself. Not yet.
Wink, wink. So in regards to this episode, you guys know how I feel about The Last of Us. Period. Y'all know, have been with us for the last month and a half as we've been talking, almost 3 months, talking about The Last of Us. This was the episode that on first watch was the most jarring and uncomfortable to watch. Not because I didn't like it, but because, of course, being the hardcore Last of Us fan that I am, I finished The Last of Us Part 1 remake for PS5 right before the season started. So I had a lot of the game so fresh in my mind that when we get to this episode, I felt that they were rushing and rushing and rushing through everything. But what I was able to realize after I watched it was that there's a very distinct and precise decision. There's certain factors that I'll go in after we start discussing the episode that they remove from this section and they replace with character expansion, that when I watched it the second time, it made all the sense in the world, and it made me fall in love with the episode. It made me fall in love and enjoy even more the expansion of what you would call the antagonist known as David. And I love how it expands and how it informs Ellie's story. I love the little changes and twitches they did to Joel's side. And I don't know. I think it's another highlight of the season. And I can't wait for the season to end. And I can't wait to talk about this episode. So let's jump in. I love how it doesn't start with the people that we left off. I love that it doesn't pick up with Joel and Ellie, but it starts with something which I was listening to the Last of Us podcast that I found very peculiar and very interesting because Troy Baker points it out. We start with scripture. We start with someone reading a passage of the Bible. It sounds like we're in Sunday service. And then we find out it is a service. There is someone reading these verses. There is a community that's mourning because they've lost someone. So this is mostly like a funeral service.
Yeah.
And then we find out that this is David, the apparent leader of not just a group, the leader of a patriarchal theocracy. He is a father slash leader slash preacher of this, what I call Silver Lakes Fellowship. Like, I found it so interesting that we started with this because we haven't seen this kind of group in the story that we know of The Last of Us as of now in the show. I'm being very specific with my words. But I love how they start here and it catches everybody, even gamers, off guard. But it does it in the best way. When you guys, because and it's funny because the first episode, the episode prior, kind of starts similar in terms of the view of winter and how winter's been hard and attacking nature, right? And then we get the look at the neighborhood, look at the houses, and then we find Ellie with Joel, right? But here we get the same thing, and we have that voiceover of this gentle, you know, sermon-like reading of scripture. When you guys found yourself watching this and found who it was, as it was teased, of course, in the trailers and the previews, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to what we were saying in the first like 3-4 episodes of this podcast, right? Something that Brett would often talk about is the cold opens and how it kind of sets the tone for the episode. And this is no different, really. I like that, especially in this instance, because a lot of the cold opens were world building. This is world building, but this one specifically is also character building and telling us who David is as a character. Like going back to the second episode, for example, right? We see everything happening as they're discovering what's going on with the cordyceps, but those characters don't stick with us throughout the episode. They don't come back. They're not reoccurring. So I think this one was very unique because they want us to pay attention to him. And I love the actor's delivery. His name is escaping me at the moment, but
Scott Shepherd.
Scott does a fantastic job in this opening sequence because you do feel that warmth, right? You do feel that that pastor vibe from his character, and the show does it, and every show does this. It's to the point where I kind of hate this trope, where churches and pastors and preachers are always the bad guys in stories like this.
Even the glasses.
Yeah.
Like they got the glasses right.
Looking like a youth pastor.
Yeah. And it's supposed to make us be like, oh, we probably should trust this guy. But it's like at this point, this trope has exhausted itself to the point where like, I don't trust this guy.
Yeah.
but
it adds so much dimension, right?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. I agree with Mike when it comes to the opening. Obviously, this is from Bible scripture. When we are in need, He shall provide. This is a man who, after the apocalypse, has found Jesus or found quote unquote God, and the version of David we get here, he does seem, like you guys said, he's the father figure. It seems like he is in control. He has that preacher vibe to him. But I do agree with Mike, where it's like, every single time we see a preacher or something of the same caliber, they're always corrupted. Like, I think the last time I remember, even from I think it was Devil All the Time, the Netflix movie where Robert Pattinson, the delusions thing. Yeah. So there was that. And then I don't know. I do agree with you, Mike. It does seem like when it comes to preachers, they're always corrupted. But there's something about David, especially in the opening scene, where he does command the room, and people listen to him. They believe in him, or they're just really afraid of him because we see this community mourning over someone's loss, and we find out that it is the father of a little girl who is around Ellie's age, and oddly for like 2 seconds reminded me of like a super young like Haley Seinfeld for some reason. I was like, that's not her, because obviously she's older now, but I was like, for some reason, like from like a certain angle, I was like, oh, that kind of looks like Haley Seinfeld when she was younger.
Christian is pitching Haley Steinfeld for Abby in season 2. That's what he's doing.
Absolutely.
But you know that if this is the younger version, then it doesn't work, because this is Mike, you can't drop the name.
But
you can't drop the name.
They don't know. It's gonna take.
Now people are gonna look it up and they'll be mad.
I mean,
that's for looking it up.
That's for them for looking it up. If they don't want to know, they don't want to know. But yeah, the opening scene, like as you guys said, you know, the cold opening. This is like an introduction to David. You know, we see the previews and whatnot all together, but you know, this is the man who he has this calming nature, but he can flip his personality like a light switch almost. And just, I know we're just talking about the opening scene here, but it's, we see the differences and also the similarities between him and Joel. But I'll just leave it at that for now.
So it's funny that you say that, because they're setting up the stage to what we should expect of this character to a degree. Like, this is going to be our focus story-wise, or he's going to play a big role story-wise. I love what you mentioned, Mike, about the idea of using the cold open to establish characters and themes that are going to follow us throughout the episode, because it didn't just occur to me that they did the same thing with Sam and Henry.
Yep.
That cold open of episode 5 is just us becoming acquainted with them until the point that they meet Joel and Ellie, right? So what I find interesting is also, Christian, what you said about him having that ability of switching personas in the flip of a switch. It occurs in the cold open.
Yeah.
Because as soon as she says, when can we bury him? Everybody's looking at him, but all he does is look at James.
Yeah.
And then his posture changes, and he says, it's too cold to dig.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, what does cold have anything to do with digging and burying someone?
For a hot second, I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And then I was like, wait.
It's like Glass Onion. It's like he said it in a way where you like, yeah, I buy that. And then you just think of it as like, no, that's just dumb.
It's one of those things where people.
So he played the Ed Norton card, but everybody's afraid of him that they just go with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I find it interesting also, because for those that know the game, even though he does say this line further along, right? He actually uses this line when he meets Ellie, or when Ellie confronts him and James. I love how the idea of world building from dialogue comes from, because here we see, because in the game we never see it, right? We know that David says, like, we also come from a larger group, bigger group, women, children, and we are very hungry. He says that in the game to Ellie when they first meet. This is the first time we see that group.
Yeah.
And I found that to be awesome. And the biggest thing is, wow, we first time see the group, and it's this kind of group.
Yeah.
That adds another dimension to how we view the character.
Yeah, because they were mentioning in the official Last of Us podcast, hosted by Troy Baker, voice actor Troy Baker.
By who? By who?
I'm kidding. It was an inside joke. I'm sorry. It was
Troy Baker.
But we see even in the game
Sup, Cap?
we haven't seen. This world is spiraled out of control. Like in the show, we see them tackle religion because, of course, there would be some type of group that is looking for salvation, comfort, meaning after the pandemic and after the world has completely just shut down, or is essentially, as of right now, cleansing itself of the real virus, which would be us, the humans.
Yeah.
And I thought that adding that in was a nice touch because obviously, like you said, David mentions that they're from a larger group in the video game, but due to time and whatnot, and people need to remember that like this game originally came out in 2013. Like, you have the remake and whatnot, or the remake, whatever, but they didn't expand upon it then, which makes sense because they kind of just want to keep it true. But you're not really able to show all of this other, the backstory. Or even when I was playing the game, I actually didn't believe that David was a part of another group because we never really saw that group. I'm like, okay, this guy is like a shifty little Slytherin over here, just kind of making his way through. And I'm like, okay, is it just him and a few other people, or is it an actual commune? But I do like how he views himself as the father figure, and we'll talk about more with the rest of the episode. But the opening was very well done, especially for people who've not played the games. And I mean, that's really what this show is for. I mean, obviously, us fans are gonna find enjoyment of it, but someone like my mom, she's been watching every single week, and she loved this episode. But we'll get more into that later. But yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about Troy Baker because we got to give him the kudos because I mean it's freaking Troy Baker, but I like how this episode it's like Rocky 2 and Rocky 3. So this episode is the idea that you have the main that you have the main character and that main character's antagonist meet consistently multiple times throughout the film.
I'm like, Mr. T is in this?
So the reason I say this is because I love how the episode is constructed into 4 major rounds. And those rounds are determined by the different times that Ellie and David clash or Ellie and David meet. So I figured that was, and I love how it's because they meet up to 4 times. The first time, of course, is when they're hunting. The second time is when Ellie is captured. The third time is the whole dialogue in the cage. And then the fourth time is showdown at Todd's Steakhouse, like the Hellfire Club. Like I love how it's built that way, but also because it's built by these encounters, the character development and the interest that we get with David increases with every encounter, because all you get is more in-depth look into his character, and you kind of find how twisted he is. And one of the things that I found so interesting, which is a big change from the game, which is why to me, I didn't notice it till I watched it and understood the change, is that just like Craig Mazin and Neil have been talking from the beginning, violence is being accentuated or used as a story tool. If the violence is not going to serve the story, they're not going to take the time to develop that. And because we spend so much time throughout these different rounds and encounters between Ellie and David, the climax of the episode hits so hard because throughout those encounters, throughout those clashes, those characters grew into the antagonist that they grew. Just like, press conferences between 2 boxers talking trash. I don't know. I just found that idea visually so interesting because you got to figure David is not really a physical threat to Ellie only. He is a mental threat. He is an emotional threat. It's a triple header. I got all the sport analogies. None of them make sense.
No, you're good. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
Oh, I was just gonna say, talking about the trifecta that David has when he knows how obviously he is a predator of some sort.
Yes.
And throughout the episode, when you're first talking to David, when Ellie's looking for medicine for Joel, they're in this random house where everything's been ransacked because everyone just keeps hitting X and square all the time, just picking up everything throughout. But it all starts when Ellie decides to go out on her own, because she's like, I can't just sit here and tend to Joel and try to make sure that he's fed and has water and whatnot, because he's too weak to even eat. So she decides to go out on her own. The whole encounter with David, like, she always has her guard up, and when she first meets David, obviously it's pretty much ripped straight from the game, but she doesn't trust him whatsoever. She doesn't want to trust anyone she comes across, if anyone at all. When she starts to lower her guard is when David starts to be, honest with her, just from this, from the beginning. And, he didn't lie to her saying, oh, we're from a larger group. I found God after the apocalypse. I went from teacher to preacher, that sort of thing. But you start to see, and this is when when you're playing the game, and I remember for the first time, kind of just, you're like, okay, well, he seems like an okay guy, and he's trying to relate with Ellie. This is like part of his predatorial, I guess, scheme, is trying to be giving, like, the, I guess, victim or whoever it is some truth, and then getting them to lower their guard down just for a moment in order for you to strike, and also isolate them from anyone else that they may have had relationships with like earlier, because he's in a way, he's trying to make Ellie feel alone, and he's trying to turn Ellie to his side. So that kind of goes with the mind games and him just being a silver tongued devil altogether. And that's the danger of, like, the snake in the grass, so to speak. Or he comes off as like this lion first off, but then the lion turns into a snake. And that's when Ellie realizes she's in trouble, when he's you're so sucked into the story where he's like, hey, I sent out 4 men, and like, this is how hard we've had it. I sent out 4 men and only 3 came back, and there's this crazy man who killed one of our comrades, and he was traveling with a little girl. And then it takes, like, Ellie's kind of like on that delay effect where it's like she doesn't realize, like, oh crap, that's me. But when she realizes it, it's like 5 seconds too late. James is already back with the medicine and has the gun pointed at her. And then that's when she's like, okay, these people are bad news. So I don't know. I don't know why I went on that rant, but I just thought it was interesting what you're talking about with David, how it's, he's so many things, and he's not physically strong, but he knows how to play the game, especially, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like, in the post-apocalyptic world, this is really his playground to kind of just prey on people and bring them into the mix. And
they're weak and vulnerable.
Yeah. It's, I mean, that's how predator minds think, that they try to isolate people from the ones that they love. Like, oh, well, your friend, like, he's not going to live long, like, he's already, he's down for the count, whatnot. He's already presumed essentially dead. So it's like, oh, I can grab this individual. It's kind of like Stockholm syndrome. That's really what David has for the rest of this commune, it seems like, because he slaps the crap out of that little girl during the beginning. I was like, oh, it's just, it's like I said, he's a stoic lion at first, and then he turns into a vicious snake, and then he's back into like this lion where it's like, oh, well, I'm the alpha, everyone needs to be following me, like I'm the head of the pack, kind of thing.
I love what Captain JJB84 says on the chat. The thing I love most about David in the show is that he has his warm, almost welcoming quality to him. But with a simple change in the voice tone, he becomes the scariest dude in the room. He's Batman. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, James is technically Batman. when you really think about it. But
Yeah. That's true.
Wow, true.
Poor
But yeah,
James.
it's he knows exactly what he's doing. Like this is someone that has all the technique. He has all the cards on the table. That understands and reads people in an instant and knows how to manipulate them to get what he wants. I do love the beauty of the metaphor or the simile or the what's the word I'm looking for? The imagery that him and James go hunting for deer,
yes,
but then he ends up hunting something else. He finds what he really wants to hunt.
Indirectly, almost.
Yes,
Because
yes.
we see that this commune is on its last legs, and there's not a lot of food to go around. But then we see a few episodes back, in Jackson, they're thriving. They're watching movies. They're playing PlayStation 2. Jack and Daxter. So it's like
I don't think the Hydro Dam is.
well, obviously, like that community is thriving versus another community that is on its
Actually,
last
there's no
legs.
PS2 because PS2 didn't come out to like 2005, right?
Oh crap, you're right.
So they're just blowing cartridges on their 60.
I keep forgetting that they changed the date. Damn. Oh, it's okay. Dreamcast, whatever.
it's not like I said on Twitter that the reason they're so depressed is Avatar: The Last Airbender doesn't exist in this universe.
That is very because Avatar doesn't hit until what 2005 it was.
Yeah.
So it's like that's half of their problem right there.
Pretty much.
So we spent a lot of time talking about David, but we got to talk about this guy.
Do we?
For those that don't know who this guy is, he plays the role of James.
He's a schmuck. I'm
But
kidding.
but in real life, his name is Troy Baker. Troy
Baker.
Baker. And for those that know, Troy Baker is the original Joel Miller. He acts, and does the motion capture and voice for the original Joel Miller in The Last of Us game, Part 1 and 2. And the idea that they found such a great role for him here, and he did such an amazing job. Go, Mike.
I'm glad you mentioned them finding a great role for him, right? Because our friend Destiny Jackson had a chance to talk to Troy about that. So I've got a quote here from her article. And he says, she essentially asked him, how did they land on James? And so apparently Craig and Neil came to him and said, we want you to play James in The Last of Us. He's like, all right, great, I'm in. Who's James again? Like he completely forgot who this character was. And together they were able to craft basically a new identity for James and his rivalry with Ellie, right? Because David essentially wants Ellie to become his right hand, to become his partner, in whatever sense of the word you want to take that.
Right.
And
that's kind of James' role, right?
Right. And so there's a certain way that Troy is playing this character of James I think is very fascinating, and it's not exactly identical to what the role of James is in the video game, because like Troy, I don't think many people remember James had a name in the video game.
Yeah, I didn't. I totally forgot. But yeah, his name is James. It's just some dude that David's with, and he goes and gets the medicine, and that's kind of like, yeah. Well, you see him a little bit after that, but he's kind of just in the background.
Yeah. So this last quote from Troy is, yeah, this was a unique opportunity for me to see the world through a new set of eyes. And he's like really grateful that he's able to come back to the same franchise, have a completely different perspective on it from this new role. I thought was really cool.
Yeah. Because I thought he said that, and it wasn't for Destiny's, from Destiny's interview, but somewhere else I forgot he had mentioned from another interview, or it might have just been in passing on the official HBO podcast, that he thought he was going to be like a clicker or something.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, this is much more cool. But
that's Destiny's article too.
Oh, is it? Okay. Yeah, like I said, it's been a long day.
I thought I was going to be a clicker. This is an upgrade, is the quote.
That's what it was. Yeah. Okay, it might have been Destiny's. I can't really remember.
I love what Captain JJB84 in the chat says. I saw a great tweet. Millions of women had to listen to their boyfriend whisper to them saying, he plays Joel in the game. That is so So
Yeah.
funny.
So dirty,
Um,
but it happened. You know it did.
I love how vulnerable we see Ellie though, because we were talking about David, the first encounter, round one, right? Where they meet. Ellie has the rifle. You can see that she can barely carry it because it's heavy. And, the same thing for Buddy Boy, one between the eyes. She's acting all tough and whatever. And you can tell that David sees through all of that, right? But I love how before we get there, we understand that she's not vulnerable just because she met David and James. She's vulnerable from the very beginning because she has no clue what to do. And I love this distinction in comparison to the game. To the game, Ellie feels like she has a bit more of a sense of control and understanding of how to survive. She feels more capable to a degree, right? I love how here it's not like weeks have passed and she's been doing this. No, it's been just a couple of days. And she's just trying to do whatever she can to keep Joel alive. She goes to hunt, and when she goes by herself, it doesn't go well.
Yeah, I'm surprised she was able to find the direction of deer. She has no idea what she's doing.
Right. She was
Especially
just
that penicillin
walking
shot.
around. She sees the rabbit runs away. She falls down,
Yeah.
and suddenly we found the deer, and she can't even believe that she hit it. Right. So I find it fascinating that the vulnerability that she's feeling, or that Bella Ramsey is so brilliantly showing us, is something that exists whether David or not is on the scene. Which is why, because we can see Ellie is vulnerable, we know David can see that. Which I think it's a great show not tell situation and moment that just continues to build the tension, right? Especially when you see how quickly she runs away once she gets the penicillin and tries to get to Joel, right?
Yeah, that is true. It is more so of Ellie trying to be like Joel, where it's like, okay, if I was in this situation, what would Joel do for me? And obviously, from the last episode we watched for Left Behind, like about 2-3 weeks prior to her meeting Joel, she lost her best friend. And this is Ellie's attempt to not to lose anyone else in her life, because Ellie's the type of person who, I wouldn't say she latches on, but she has a lot of empathy. And when it comes to someone that she finds that she gravitates to, she is like, oh, like like, not that this person belongs to me, but I gravitate this person, like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z. And when she goes out to try to hunt for food for Joel, because she's trying to go through any lengths as it can not to lose anyone else that are in her life, especially at such a young age, I think it's nice to see her fail a little bit in between, where it's not just, oh, like in the game, more so Ellie kind of knows what she's doing. She has more of an understanding, but
in the
she's
game,
still
she's Hawkeye.
Well, yeah, in a way. But I mean, she's still scared because, I mean, obviously,
Yeah,
David still
of course.
as soon
She scares that rabbit though pretty hard in the
Oh
game.
God,
Yeah.
dude, that was great. There
Well,
was
she
like
nails
some
the
video,
rabbit.
this one girl was playing it for the first time. She's like, "Oh my God, it's like the cutest thing ever." And then she was like, "Ah!"
Well, let's talk a little bit about that though, because I think that was one of the most interesting changes, right? Because in the game, when you meet David,
You can't
and
make
you
people go
go,
through that a second time.
what was that?
You can't make people go through the rabbit scene a second time.
So, yes. So you go to that house to wait for James, right?
Yeah.
In the game, you get attacked by a horde of infected. And
Yeah.
that is one of the biggest action set pieces throughout the entire game. It's like you're 15 20 minutes working together with David, trying to take down these runners, these clickers, and even bloaters. So the idea
yeah.
that they understood that the importance of building this relationship was through dialogue, right? Makes it that much more interesting. That I found that brilliant. The first time I didn't understand why I felt everything was rushed, but then after watching it again, I'm like, wait a minute, there's like 15 minutes of gameplay that is not occurring here.
Yeah.
That to me, I'd go the other way a little bit. I feel like having, of course, you can't do the 15-minute action set piece
Yeah.
like
Right.
a video game can, but I feel like having them fight off a bloater or a horde of infect, a clicker or two may have helped a little bit, because I feel like that bond of going to war with somebody and surviving and working together
Trust,
makes their
yeah.
dynamic a little bit stronger than it does in the show. So that
I can
for
agree
me,
with that. I can agree
that-
with that.
yeah. So like again, the show doesn't do a terrible job by cutting it out, but it's one of those things where week after week, I would ask you both actually on two different podcasts, how does the lack of action feel? And like getting here into the
Yeah.
penultimate episode, that's one moment I think I can directly point to where it's like probably should have had a small 2-minute scene of them fighting off one single clicker, something.
Yeah,
know?
because we got that last episode with Left Behind, and clearly during that action sequence, I mean, there's been a lot of great action sequences. Obviously, we're not getting through the game because Craig Mason did state that, you know, this is more focused on the characters. And
Yeah.
once you start watching the show that way, like obviously it's different. But yeah, it's not that it's sorely missed, but you know, just playing through the game, obviously in a real life situation, bloaters and infected in general would not move on to colder climates unless they started to adapt. And that's obviously why we didn't see them in Jackson, Wyoming. And you know, we didn't see them here. But it feels like maybe like a clicker or two, or just
Make
like
it a bear. Who
or-
cares?
yeah, like an infected. And it's, you know, like Mike said, you know, it's no slight to the
Cocaine bear.
show. Yeah. Because they are trying, you know, something different. This is more, they're trying to make this more of a human story, and I totally get that, and they've done a great job with it. But yeah, it seems as if, you know, the clicker, the infected are there, and we got one last episode. They've been sprinkled throughout. Not saying there has to be a clicker in every single one, but just to kind of strengthen that bond, because that is, like you guys said, that is something that you go through as playing, when you play as Ellie in the game, and when you meet David, where it's like, you know, you kind of go through some type of, you know, strength or relationship bonding exercise or whatever you want to call it. So it's like, oh, you know, well, I just faced a bunch of horde clickers with this guy, like he's trying to survive too, so maybe I can trust him a little bit.
Yeah, that's where I kind of land on that. Yeah, it's one of those things where that's the give and take of an adaptation like this, where
Yeah,
I get why you would cut those sequences out, because again, gameplay, it's a game, it has to be there. Show doesn't, like, up until this point, you can argue that we didn't need to see all those extra sequences. I just think it makes their relationship a little bit stronger. But I had a question for you guys. How do we feel about tough girl Ellie as she's trying to seize control of the situation, and like she's barely able to hold the gun, and she's using weird terms like buddy boy, trying to sound like a tough guy from a Looney Tunes cartoon?
I find it I like it because I find it so genuine. You know what I mean? It's like you can tell she's doing her own Joel impression. That's what she's doing.
she
know what I
really
mean?
does like lower her voice, and she's like,
Yeah, like she's trying because she doesn't know any other way to cope. Because here's the other side of this, which if we didn't have episode 7, we wouldn't understand. She doesn't have parents. She never had role models.
She never met her parents.
She met it, you know what I mean? She never had people that she can look up to and be like, okay, if I am like this person, I can get far. You know
She
what I mean?
asked Marlene if she was her mom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do I
And
look like your
Marlene literally
mom,
said,
you?
"Do I look like your mom?"
No.
You know what I mean? Like I loved it actually. I love because to me it feels that's the grounded stuff that I'm very fond of. And even though yes, we didn't get we could always use another clicker. We can always use another runner. You know what I mean? I do like
Yeah.
that. I do like that angle. I like the idea of because it's not there, it's all about how Ellie finds strengths within herself. You know what I mean? Because interestingly enough, as she first encounters them, she's pretending to be this person that she isn't. But as she finds herself alone with him after she gets caught, right, in round 2 and round 3, as she's talking to him in the cage, she understands that it's not about trying to be like Joel, is like, I have to be me. You know what I mean? I have
Yeah.
to face this head on with my smarts. I don't have any other tools except the ones that make me who I am, which is why it becomes such great scenes and clashes, especially when we find out what Ellie does when she finally tells him her name. Um, but to not go too far ahead, because we know she gets the medicine, right? She goes to Joel, applies it. She has no clue. She just sticks it there, and hopefully it works. But
I saw so many like nurses. They're like, why would she do that? I'm like, she's
She
a
does it.
14-year-old girl who was born post-pandemic. Why
don't
would
know.
she know where to stick that needle?
Did we not see last week where she is going up the down escalator and having the time of her life?
Yes.
Or 2 weeks ago before that, she's like, I've never been in a car. This
She's
is the
never
first time
even
I've
heard
seen
of
a
a
monkey.
seatbelt.
it's like a spaceship.
Yeah.
It's like, of course
I
she
was
can't
like,
apply
I mean,
penicillin.
it's more realistic that she would
Sally
just apply it
fucking
straight.
ride.
Yeah. It's more
Yes.
realistic that she would apply it straight to the infected area because it's not like she has a manual. She
That's
can't
what
pick
makes
one
sense
up.
to her, right? You put
Yeah.
the medicine where the boo boo is. So she stick it where the
Oh, my
It's
God,
like
I know.
rubbing Neosporin on a
Well,
scratch.
so we go back, right? She puts the medicine, she lays down with Joel, very, very reminiscent of the game. Like there's one of those beautiful moments that you get that you're like, she's trying to do what she can to keep him warm, right? But then we go back to where we started, which is Todd's Steakhouse, which is a great locale because a lot of things happen in Todd's.
Amazing ambiance.
Yes.
Amazing atmosphere.
Yes. And we find that the commune is preparing food. It's preparing dinner. We don't know this yet, but they say it's venison, but you can see that a lot of them are like, they're doubting what this is. I call it the Hansel Gretel special. That's what we think about it, but we don't see it. But I love how we're so used to zombie post-apocalyptic media that whenever there's people, there's hunger, there's a group of people growing hungry and they're cooking and people go like, it's venison. You know that something's up. I love how they didn't even try to play it down. Like it was meant to be like, what is it?
All the chefs in the kitchen are just like, bro, I know what venison looks like. This is not what that kind of meat
And then a
looks like.
few minutes later, we see them dragging in the deer. So we know it's
The venison is gone or hasn't arrived yet.
I don't know, it's bear. It's something. Make up something.
Yeah, you gotta pick a more obscure animal than venison because like I feel like we all know what that should look like.
Yeah.
Now, I love how when David returns to the commune, right? We have the moment where apparently we all find out, or he finds out that they know about Ellie and Joel being out there. And I love how different he comes off as. And when the girl screams, we should kill them all. Oh, by the way, wait. commune first.
Mm.
Everybody gets a plate of food. Did y'all notice that nobody ate till he sat down to eat?
Yeah.
That's fear right there. That's a mixture of fear, respect, and seeing him like
That's not
this
respect. That's just
divine. Yeah, right. He's being seen. No, and after, and this is right before we get there, and the little girl screams, "We should kill him." She freaking gives him that Will Smith slap and just knocks
Gives him
her
the
down.
hands.
No, and it's the slap that keep on giving, because not only does he slap her so hard that she gets knocked down, he then talks down to her like if it were her child and literally says, "You will always have a father," which is the creepiest thing to say in public. And the fact that he's literally saying, starting today, I'm going to be your father, which I don't know what her mom is thinking, but you're mute, Mike.
It can also be that creepy pastor angle, right? Like he's
Right.
talking about
As we've seen.
God. So like,
Yeah, and that's what's happening. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's creepy as hell, because as soon as he says that, he sits at their table, and she and the mom gets him a plate. Which, by the way, did y'all notice that he's eating a lot more than everybody else?
That's what I'm saying. He's the lion. He
Like
is the male lion
substantially
in
a
the
lot
pack.
more food than everybody else, which
He
is
the
crazy
lion.
because he knows what he's eating, and he's
Yeah.
just happy and just it's
one of my coworkers was just like,
Buddy.
"That is disgusting." That made her like sick to her stomach.
She should watch the movie Fresh. If she thinks that's
We're good. Yeah, that's all I could think about was Fresh the entire time.
Yep.
It's a good movie, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's
But
a tough
yeah.
watch.
Oh yeah. But yeah, like when and I'll wait for you guys to do the big reveal, because it's what I've ever since I started playing the game, like even back in 2013, like the big reveal of David and his commune, and it blew, like my brain just turned like 360 degrees sideways, and I was just like, what? Like that was the scary part of the game.
yeah.
It's so, but yeah, when it comes to David, like you said, he gets most of the food, other people don't eat until he eats, which is complete fear. No one's respecting that man. It is all fear.
So
100%.
my question, guys, is that the girl's father? Since we couldn't bury him, like, who do we think that was? That's what I kind of took it as. It's like we couldn't
So
bury him. Where's the body? He's in the stew. That's how I took it.
Yeah.
Wait,
because
so the wife is grabbing Pete.
That's what I took it as.
It
I'm
could
trying to get
be.
your perspective.
Yo,
I mean, it could have
I
been.
mean,
sold
that was
out
fresh, not frozen.
because they are eating their own.
Where's the
dead.
beef?
It was able to be thawed, and
Yeah.
They're cannibals. Let's put it out there.
Spaghetti.
Way to not
We're-
dance around it, Christian. You finally
There you
popped
go.
it, huh?
Well, I didn't want to like it, but it's yeah. I don't know if it's necessarily.
I love how
guy.
they reveal it though. I think to me it was. I love how it wasn't just blatantly expressed or yelled. Literally, we just find what Van Gogh was missing. And I find it so interesting that it was just a very slight. That's a cutting board. That's underneath the cutting board, and you gotta put it together yourself. So
Yeah.
I do love that, because it's not till later on that we actually see the ice box, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine being an idiot watching this episode? Like Ellie's talking. Like he's talking to Ellie, and she's just like, "Yeah, he got attacked by this guy, this little girl, Logan X-23. Oh my gosh, it's crazy." It's like, "Oh wow, somebody cut their ear while dicing potatoes. That is so bizarre, man. Like it just goes
Yeah.
over your head the entire
Gotta
time."
watch for those sharp knives.
It's just like there's a lot of clues that you have to actually think to make it come together.
Watch
It's
out for that kitchenware.
like so funny.
So they get together. Ellie finds out that they're hunting her, right?
Yes.
And Joel. So she tries to keep him away. James lands the shot. By the way, I'm kind of surprised that we never mentioned the name Callus, which, Callus is the name of the horse.
I think they did back in the episode when they went to Jackson. I think they did.
They mentioned Shimmer, which is
Shimmer,
the horse
Shimmer.
which is the horse. Thank you.
It's a horse.
It's a horse.
Of course.
Which, by the way, is a very young horse. And I'm going to leave it at that. But Callus was the name of it's funny because in the game, Ellie goes like, what kind of name is Callus? And Joel, of course, tries to pretend that he knows everything. So Ellie, Ellie's captured. Joel literally, I love the first kill. And I know that sounds like bloody, but the way that he's like, he has no strength. And all he does is throw himself with a knife like this. And it works.
Well, it's more of like obviously he's been wrestling, but he has one shot
Yes.
to kill this man because Elliot said, hey,
Don't fall
a
asleep.
group of people. Yeah, like don't fall asleep. Like something is not right. And obviously, it's more of Joel just trying to muster up as much strength as he can. And he's like, if I'm going to do this, he's like, I literally have one chance to kill this man. And then after that, he's like, I'm done. He's like, I'll die if that's, the case. But he gets him. It is funny though, because it's like, he kind of just goes for it. But it's more of like, I was just looking at a situation where it's like, it is scary. Because it's like Joel's acting like he's Ghostface over there. First he's in one place, no, he's not, and he's like, "Oh, I disappeared. Where did I go?" And he's like, "Ah!" But but it's not like he's like
Joel
yelling
just screaming,
and like running.
"Ah!"
Like he literally just has to. He's like, it's striking at the perfect time where you're least expecting it. And he's like, "I got him," and he just boom gets it done. And he's like, it needs to go in so deep. And that's it. It is scary. Like you are literally defenseless. It's almost as if like an intruder came into your house and you're taking a shower or whatever. You are completely like there's nothing around you. You are helpless in that situation. I know it's not exactly the same, but it's
you guys don't keep nunchucks in your shower.
It's like you are showering. It's like see if you hear like. An intruder is
just hit him with your shelf.
It's like I'm in the shower. I'm naked. I can't do anything right now.
This is evolving into a different scenario.
But regardless,
do you have a shower sound on your sound box? Is it?
But in general, it is scary for Joel. Ellie is scared for Joel. Joel's scared for himself. He's like, hey, I'm not in the best shape. She's nursing me back to health, but like any good daughter would. But it's like I can't imagine me in that situation where you are literally immobilized and you have to find the strength to not only get up, but to take down one person. And like it might as well be 100 at that point.
Yeah.
And Ellie's got the gun. Like that's the thing.
Yes, Ellie took. She took the gun. She didn't take the rifle. But I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's like just imagine from Joel's perspective. He's been lying here for God knows how long, and then all of a sudden she's just frantic, and he gets like, "Well, I guess I'm killing everybody I see."
Yeah.
So he has no context.
I love what Captain JJB84 says on the chat. Which I think is a very good observation with how Pedro played Joel this episode. You can tell Joel is still quite injured despite holding his own against him.
Yeah.
And you see that a lot. So we know Ellie gets captured and taken away.
Yeah.
Callus, RIP, might end up in a good stew.
That horse got blown up.
So we get the famous interrogation scene that everybody's been talking about, right? Or at least everybody was talking about that it was coming, right?
Before we get there, can we just acknowledge how bad these extras are? Joel is at like 10% HP.
He's at
And
5.
you can't do anything against him.
Well, you got to figure one thing though, to a
He's at
degree,
50 life points left.
they're hungry. They're making it a point to say that they're hungry. So you can say that they're because remember, if you look at everybody looks malnourished. You know what I mean?
Great.
Everybody.
Okay,
Well,
so
yeah,
they're
they're eating humans.
With
That's not exactly the nutrients that your body needs.
Well, David doesn't look that way, but he's eating a lot more than everybody else.
Yeah. David,
Yeah, this is
David's
not fixing
eating-
anything.
I
But
don't
I
think
agree.
David's even
But I do
eating-
like how Joel is constantly shown like he's still rocking that 10 HP. You know, he's doing that
Yeah.
Bloodborne run and he's making it to the final boss. Now, I do have to say, I do love the fact that we can go back to episode 6 and
Mhm.
know that the way he's interrogating these two characters is something that we've seen before. I do like that. I love the callback to episode 6. I do have a pet peeve though,
Ooh.
and I understand why everything happened during the day. I understand that not a lot of time has passed and things are happening around the same time. And Mike, I can already see. I know I know your gears. I can see your gears turning, Mike. But in the game, this entire interrogation sequence occurs at night.
Yep.
In a dark room with almost no lighting. And when I tell you that it looks different and unique, it's different and unique. So I do have to say that in terms of the presentation and the ambiance, the game does it for me. It sells it to me in a way that I go like, wow, this is amazing, horrifying, crazy.
It
Now,
also adds a layer to that too, because by having a significant amount of time pass, that makes you even more afraid, right? Like Ellie has been on her own for how many hours? She's had to deal with David for how long? You
It's
know,
been
it kind of
not 1 to 2 days, maybe 3.
yeah, it raises the bar just a little bit. And the way that it's presented here, it's like, was she in there for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour,
Right.
3 hours? I can't really tell.
Right. Yeah, that is very true. Well, yeah, when it comes to that interrogation scene, it is something that I feel like us as fans of the game have been craving to see that violent Joel, because we've throughout the entire series, I think it was either episode 1 or 2. I think it was episode 1 where we first meet Ellie, where
Yeah.
Marlene's like, hey, like you're gonna be, with Tess and Joel, they're capable. And she's like, what are they capable of? Well, we've kind of seen it with Joel this episode altogether, where it is ripped straight from the game altogether. It's like we said before, it is just, it's different. I can't necessarily say one thing's better than the other. I mean, obviously, when I think of the interrogation scene, it's definitely the video game, but I think Pedro Pascal did a great job.
Oh no, yeah, he did.
Yeah, for sure.
No,
But,
he
yeah,
delivered, and it's not about the quality of the scene.
Yeah.
It's just that there's something about the setting
Mhm.
and the presentation
Yeah.
that
and
just gives it this.
That
Then we
freaking
finally
blue
get the
sky strikes
Joel-
again.
Yeah. the Joel that everyone's been waiting for. We're seeing the great lengths that Ellie is going to protect Joel, and now that Joel knows that something is right, he finds her backpack amongst the other headless corpses in that like locker freezer area, and now Joel is going through, he's going through great lengths to save Ellie, because this is a story about love, but also, and I think I don't think we necessarily got to it just yet, but when Ellie gets captured by David and his men, there's the line where Ellie, or no, when David says, "You have a violent heart," and he's like, I know this because I also have a violent heart.
So I have it as round 3 of Ellie
Yeah.
versus David.
This
It
is
has
the
the-
isolation part where he's
Right.
like,
It has an
yeah.
anime version title, and the title is Violent Hearts. That's the name of the episode of the manga chapter of the last.
It's too short. That's too short. You know that it should be round 3, Ellie versus David, the Violent Hearts. Who's gonna win this time? Shadow Clone Jutsu.
Spectacular.
You know, like the Naruto's like
Soundboard,
a
soundboard,
500.
I wish I had it, but
You know
But-
how anime be like, oh, this is 20 different words in the title. This is how I
Yes.
got reanimated as a slime 2 years ago in this isekai
Yeah.
anime.
yeah.
Now,
But yeah, we sorry.
A lot
No,
happens.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
a lot happens in this moment, right?
Right.
Because David is just continues to open himself. He continues to try to present himself as before that, when he slaps this girl, going back to the slap, I love how that kind of sets the tone for the imagery of how he is like a Joel figure, right? Like he is Dark Joel. And
Yeah.
then that could have been Ellie.
Ginger Joel.
You-
Really. He's a ginger.
So I like that. And now Dark Joel is trying to steal our Ellie and letting her and trying to convince her. So I love how he reveals what he sees in her, the darkness, the violent heart, but he also reveals who his God is, which I think to me was the most fascinating change and reveal. Because not only are they literally telling us that he's always had these Netflix's You serial killer tendencies. So he's been a psychopath forever. He was just a teacher. But what we see when the steakhouse is burning into flames, you can tell he's done this before. He's done it a lot. He has to process. He has things that he likes, things that he does, right? But the idea that after the cordyceps outbreak occurred, he was able to find a means to weaponize faith, weaponize scripture, because his God was cordyceps. He revealed. I find that to be a very interesting twist. When he started talking about that, and he started talking about cordyceps the way that Craig and Neil have been talking about it, that he's the one that kind of had this revelation. What were your thoughts?
Well, I think because I don't know if he necessarily outright said that like he worships the infected, but I think it was more of like an analogy of them, of their way of showing love, where they're spreading their, I guess you could say, joy or compassion or whatever throughout.
No, but he makes
world.
it sound like he's one of them. Like they love the way
he makes
loves.
it seem, because they do whatever to protect their own, they kill if they have to, because that is the it is the alpha or the main predator of this new world.
Predator,
Yeah, the apex predator, because as of right now, like humans are the infection, not the other way around. But I thought it was pretty interesting because I didn't really think he was going to go down that route by like seeing how fascinated he was by the cordyceps. But it is more of it's kind of like the self-proclaimed like narcissistic mentality where for whatever reason David thinks, at least in the show, he thinks that he's top dog. He thinks he has everything under control, but in reality he has failed his commune because they did not prepare for the winter. They did not stock up enough food in order for their commune to thrive and survive. Like except for Jackson, they're watching movies, kids are playing, running around everywhere, and it seems more together. This is more of like an abandoned like town, and more so just like an abandoned steakhouse where people just so happen to stumble upon. There is no community where everyone respects each other, and no one's living in fear in Jackson. Everyone's living in fear at this
Like, if
commune.
David really cared about this community, why does he eat that much more than everybody else?
It's the very opposite of, like you were mentioning, Jackson, right? It's even different than Kansas City, right? Like
Yeah,
Kathleen's town, and then we have Jackson, they're all doing way better. This is the worst group
Yeah.
of people we've come into contact with, and it's because they're
heck,
led
Bill
by
and Frank were
David.
doing better, and it's only them two. Granted, but like they had all
Yeah.
time of that place is
Yep.
flourishing.
Yep. And they were able to share and trade with Joel and Tess.
Yeah, but
Right.
yeah, with David is he's failing his people. I don't know if he realizes that, but the
He
fact that
doesn't
they're
care.
resorting, the fact that they're resorting to eating their own dead says a lot.
Well, you look at it this way, you can tell he doesn't care because he's eating more than everybody else. As soon as another body drops, that's more food for everybody. That's the
Yeah.
way, that's the mentality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is true.
So we've been dancing around the fact, mainly because of YouTube reasons. We can't actually say it, but David is a predator. And I was shocked by how many people didn't pick up on that from the game. Like,
Yeah, in the game, I feel like it's a little bit more subtle, but it's still there.
yeah,
Like you still pick up on it. Here, it's more obviously on the nose. He's still, David still like holds Ellie's hand the same kind of way, but he says something in the show that like obviously makes it more apparent. I forgot what he said, and then she's like, "Oh," but like by then, Ellie's on to David's games,
yeah,
and she doesn't want anything. She just wants to be let out. But that's where that violence survival mode. She's in full on survival mode this entire
Fight or flight.
episode. Yeah, and endure and survive.
Endure.
But yeah, I do agree, Mike. I thought like when I first played the game, it was definitely creepy vibes, but here it's even creepier vibes because
Yes.
yeah.
Like, you
he
really don't
keeps
get
talking about
creepy.
love and
Yeah, I love because you really don't get creepy vibes from David per se until the conversation in the cage and
Mhm.
when he gets
Yeah.
closer to Ellie.
yeah, when he
Like,
thinks
here
that
you
he's
get-
coming in for the kill.
Yeah, like, you get creepiness from the cold open.
Yes,
Like, they made it a point so that you know that this guy is not it's not a good person. But I love how they dance around it and present it in a way that it's just like, okay, Ellie's in trouble. I love the fact that we honestly felt that Ellie was in trouble. And even though Joel is hurting and trying to get to where she is, Ellie's on her own. So I love the fact that we constantly went back. Like, we kept going back to scenes with her and David by herself. And it's literally just David and her. Now, of course, one of my favorite things of the episode, you guys know what it is. It's how Ellie introduces herself. It is the most Ellie move any Ellie in any
Can ever
medium
Ellie.
who ever Ellie'd. Yes.
somewhere Ashley Johnson is smiling.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love how it's, and also the delivery that Bella does. It's so great because she's kind of like leaning into it and like kind of making you think that she's buying the beans that he's throwing out there. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And
She's
suddenly,
playing innocent right now.
right. So when she actually tries to break his finger and he walks away, she goes, Ellie. And he goes, what? He goes, you can tell your friends that Ellie's the name of the girl who broke your fucking Like that moment to me was like, yeah. Like, it was the greatest hurrah moment. I need a sound bar. Give me something. Give me. Yes. It was. I mean, Christian's here. I'm gonna ask for assistance
Every single time.
every single time. I love how great that moment is.
Yeah.
Because Ellie doesn't care. Like, of course she doesn't want to die, but if she dies, she's gonna make sure the other person is not happy. She's gonna make sure she can do as much damage as she can, which in a way makes David right that she is a violent person. And I find it interesting because on when we get to the climax, right? What happens right at the end? You go back to episode 7 when she's bit. You know, when she conquers the infected, she's celebrating. And then when she finds out that she's bit, she is ferociously destroying everything.
Yeah, because it's that it's that mentality of a kid thinking that they're invincible, thinking, from Left Behind episode 7, where they're like, it's me and Riley in this mall, like, there's no infected around, like, we're fine, we're safe. But that's when you're in the most danger when it comes to a world like this, because as soon as you let your guard down 100%, something bad is going to happen. Yeah. And that's the danger of this world, is that you can never be too safe anymore. Like, there is no such thing, because that just, your guard's completely down, and then, that's when tragedy strikes.
So when we get to the final round, showdown at Todd's, when Ellie and David grab her to quote unquote cut her into tiny little pieces. The first time you saw it, of course, we're talking about the game. Did you guys ever think she was going to play the infected card?
I mean, when I first played it was back in 2013, so I didn't back then, no. But then when she said it, I was like, oh, that's right. Because like you kind of like that she's infected, but it doesn't really cross your mind,
right?
Like it is a Hail Mary of sorts, because she has nothing left. Right. That is her ace in the hole, where it's like, I can tell them I'm infected. I have this bite mark. Like, let me use it to my advantage.
I love how smart, it talks about the wit, how smart Ellie can be.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because I feel the exact opposite. I feel like that's the dumbest move you can pull, because what's going to stop them from shooting her in the head right then and there?
I mean, they're going to kill her. Boom, done. Well, look at it this way. At least they're not going to chop her into tiny pieces. Like,
I guess.
I mean, like, it's smart, but it's also stupid, because like it is a now or never moment.
Yeah, right. It's like, but it also kind of created the opening for her to look for something else to do. Like,
I mean, yeah,
it was the greatest smoke screen. It was a fungal screen.
Well, yeah, it's just, like, if this is either going to work, like, there is a small percentage that they even care to hear what you're saying. Yeah, because David says, like, I'll play along, like, whatever.
Well, fine. You got to figure, why they listened though, right?
Well, because she shows them the bite mark, and they're like, oh.
But not only that, remember,
he bit her.
Concerned because they freaking eat people.
Yeah. Well, he also bit her, but then that was another creepy thing that David said. He's like, I like the biting part. I was like, that's so weird. It's now, it was so weird. I was like,
was I the only one that find it very meta that Ellie kills Joel?
I thought that was great. It looks so awesome.
Somebody on social media, I don't remember which platform, they were like, it was a missed opportunity to not have James get killed by Joel, so we can get Troy Baker versus Pedro Pascal.
Yeah.
But this works out too.
Well, I mean,
thought he was going to be David to begin with.
When you think about, this is like an Easter egg for those that know. When you think about how things move on further in the story, this is a very meta way of showing Ellie killing Joel. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much.
So Ellie runs away. Joel is still trying to find her, right?
Mm-hmm.
And nobody finds Joel apparently because I don't know. Everybody's trying to hide.
He's got that stealth mod turned up to 10.
Yes,
Yes,
he
sir.
got that Makoto Kusanagi Ghost in the Shell stealth thing. Optical gear. So the final showdown begins between Ellie and David. They're playing hide and stab the cannibal throughout the steakhouse. Um, I love how towards the end, like I love how the David's arc is in the episode because he starts hiding everything, right? And as the episode progresses, you see more of him and more of him and more of him. And by the time the Todd Steakhouse is in flames, he's in full on hunting mode. You know what I mean? And I find
Yeah.
this so scary and so interesting. And I'm scared for Ellie until it happens. She actually, in the midst of the flames, he's able to catch him off guard. And when he thinks he has the upper hand, she cuts him into tiny little pieces.
Yeah, this is like the part where it's not even rational thinking.
Yeah.
It's just pure instincts
Yeah.
of survival and trying to get back to Joel, where it's
I don't think she's thinking about Joel at this point. She's just she wants to live.
well,
She
yeah,
wants
yeah.
to live for sure, but yeah, I feel like she's thinking about Riley and Tess and Sam and Henry and like
Yeah,
this is
she's
her
channeling
letting everything out.
Yes.
Like everyone
Yes.
that she's come across, that she's
Yes.
met, and that has passed.
Yes.
And it's
100%.
like this is her way of venting. It's weird,
Yeah.
obviously, but God, I think she like beyond, like she kills David. Like this is like
She
obliterating
destroys
him.
David.
Like this is beyond death, where it's
Yes.
like talk about beating a dead horse. She's just going for it. And like it is this pure instinct where it's like this is for Joel, this is for everyone that I've lost because of people like this and other situations and whatnot. But it's like,
You know what?
You
But
know-
I see it differently too, though. Like it's not just her channeling all her experiences, but it's also her lashing out, like because she has no one else to protect her. She's alone, and she's not gonna let this freaking guy. You know what I mean? Like she's not gonna let this freaking guy take her down.
I feel like we're kind of saying the same thing though, because she's alone because of what happened to those other people. So like
True.
the anger
True.
is all still stemming from the same place, no matter how we describe it. I think it's all kind of the same thing.
Okay,
Honestly.
I can see that. I can see that.
and like Elliot said before when she was talking to Henry and Sam, or Sam more so, where she says that like I'm scared of being alone.
Yeah, that's her
And
biggest fear.
that's when her empathy comes in, her ability to connect or attach to certain people, because she is so young. She didn't know her parents. Like, I mean, her parents were dead. So it's like she's constantly looking for those parental figures in her life.
I see you, Mike.
And when she wait, what?
I didn't say nothing.
But yeah, it's her trying to
Sharingan.
Bakugan.
it's her going berserk altogether, and she really
Yeah.
is just trying to survive at this point where, all this craziness has happened. Because when David pins her down, it's, it's clearly getting to that point where it's like, okay, like something is happening here. And then that is when she just said no. Like, this is, that is the last thing that she needs.
Yes.
Like, it's crazy. The last thing anyone would ever want in this world, in that kind of situation. But when she walks out, I do this is such a small little gripe, when I wish that they would have had Joel enter the burning building like he did,
like the game.
Yeah, because it was just a little weird where it's like he kind of comes out of nowhere, but I guess he would just come out of nowhere when she walks out, because then she's like yelling, screaming, like, like don't fucking touch me and stuff like that. And then we get the baby girl line, which breaks me down every single time. But I don't know. It makes more sense for Joel to find Ellie in the burning building in the game, because during the gameplay scenes, it's all the direction is pushing in that direction, where it's like, oh my gosh, like he sees the fire and the flames and he says Ellie. That's when he goes in. But I guess it makes more sense for the show to do the way that they did, because Joel didn't know exactly where Ellie was. He knew she was in the vicinity, but once she sees him outside, it was just kind of like, hey, like, we pull you off from the side. But
yeah, I feel like you could have had it like he could still meet her outside, but maybe have a shot of him seeing smoke or something. So you can kind of lead up to why he's there.
Yeah, but the smallest of all small nitpicks. But we still get it, because she was like, oh, like he tried to, and then she just can't even finish it, because she's in her, like, she's literally just been through hell, like figuratively and literally. And it's like she cleaves the crap out of Troy Baker, though. The way that was cut together, I was like, ooh, like she darts out the door. I was like, she was like
Neil, do you have some resentment? Like, one too many takes last time? What happened, bro?
But apparently Troy Baker loved it, because he loved the way that he was killed. He's like, it looked awesome. I was like, heck yeah.
So we've talked about the episode. We've broken it down. We've given our thoughts. We always like to end the episode going through a list of Easter eggs from the game. We're about to do that list. Y'all ready?
I lost my list, but I'm following your lead. I think I closed my tab out by accident.
No, you're good.
Oh, no.
So Ellie goes hunting, finds a rabbit, then shoots a deer, finds David and James, just like the game. David attempts to befriend Ellie and reveals she knows about her and Joel, just like the game. Ellie returns to Joel to administer penicillin. Ellie drives David's gang away from Joel and ends up getting caught. A death in the family. Callus gets shot. Joel interrogates two of David's men to find their camp to save Ellie. David tries to befriend Ellie again while revealing more of his creepy nature. Like, they literally played the greatest hits in this episode. Mm-hmm. Ellie breaks David's fucking finger. David says, what was it you said? 10 little pieces. Joel reaches the resort area, finds Ellie's backpack, and I love how they highlight the little monster keychain that she has.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Joel finds the human venison that David's camp has been consuming. Ellie tries to convince James and David that she's infected before they chop her into tiny little pieces. Ellie kills Joel James with the meat cleaver. It's like she channeled her inner Bloodborne build. Ellie and David play hide and stab the cannibal at Todd's Steakhouse. Ellie changes her inner...
Not a broken glass in sight.
Unrealistic.
Yes.
Broken plates in sight.
She
I'm
finishes
just-
David with the meat cleaver and destroys him violently. And
Yeah.
Joel finds and emotionally saves Ellie, which I love the idea that he was not able to save her
He wasn't
physically.
even expressed the way how he felt about it. Not
Right.
neither of them could. Like this is the point where they have a perfect understanding of each other's feelings for
Yeah.
one another.
The
When
roles are clear. This is a father-daughter relationship. So
yeah.
what a great
Before she was
episode.
pregnant. Yeah.
Guys, the finale is next week.
Yeah.
I don't think the world is ready. Like, everybody has loved the season. I am convinced that next week's episode, the finale, will be the most controversial episode of the season and of TV in a long time. Because it definitely was one of the most controversial endings of the game. Because I think I can say it now without fear. For those that have not played the game, season 1 has captured 100% of part 1, the first game of The Last of Us. So when we move on to season 2, 3, 4, how many seasons they do, it's going to be part 2. So this is a closed-ended loop. If for whatever reason at any point this was never renewed, you would have still gotten a complete story. But I'm glad that it was renewed. I'm glad that we're going to see more of the world of The Last of Us. Christian, thank you for joining us, dude.
Thank you for having me. Like, seriously, it's been a lot of fun.
If people needed to find you and your soundboard, where can they find you?
So you can find my podcast or our podcast, Film Optics, down below. That is Optics with an X, on Twitter and Instagram. We are more active on Twitter though. You can, we tweet all this random stuff as well as our own podcast episodes all together. And it's been a interesting year so far, but we've covered things such as The Last of Us on a weekly basis, which Mike has joined us on a few episodes, as well as some sprinkling in some amazing movies here or there, like Cocaine Bear, that you can listen to right now. You can also keep an eye out for our Scream 6 review, which is spoiler free.
Nice.
Should be hitting March 8th. That's when the embargo drops. So, but yeah, we cover a podcast that delves into movie and TV reviews, all the same. And you can find our podcast on audio podcast platforms around the internet. That includes Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. But yeah, it's just been a crazy year so far. I feel like we've been covering a fair amount all together. We're about maybe 20 episodes in, and gosh, March is just gonna hike those numbers up even higher. But yeah, you can definitely stop by and listen to our takes on all things movie and TV. But thank you so much for having me. This is a lot of fun. Breaking down the episode when it comes to The Last of Us, and we get one more episode left, and then it's been renewed for season 2. So I'm more interested to see how they're going to cover season 2 with these characters, especially Bella.
Yes, Bella's gonna do fantastic things.
Yeah.
I feel like she's been great this season. All the Christian stuff is in the description, guys. You can find it there. It's already in the description. Just go follow Film Optics wherever you get your podcasts.
Awesome. So, guys, we've done another episode 9 of Beyond the Clickers, but covering
that's
8.
right. You guys did the pre-episode. That's right. Yeah,
we do
yeah.
the thing. We got great
Technically,
stuff.
episode 10.
Yes,
because we did a season review with Ring
True.
Geekness before that too.
We have a great stuff planned for the finale. We will be releasing a pre-recorded version of our analysis and discussion of episode 9, and we have an ending explained video. So if you want to watch the entire discussion, it will be available as soon as the episode ends at 10 p.m. on Sunday. And if you want to just focus and listen to an ending explained video, we're going to have a great video for you guys. So stay tuned to the Shatter After on YouTube, and find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, where podcasts are found. And I got to leave you with something. It's a bit of a tradition here, but an important tradition at that. To all fans of The Last of Us on HBO and games, I leave it with these very important words. As the great Savage Starlight would say, endure and survive.
Survive.
Have it awesome, guys. We'll see you next time.
Sisageo.